We're going to make a helicopter, and again, I allow as much creativity as you want. So you can decide that you want to do one of these two designs, and I give you the template specifically for those designs, or you can see some of the other ones that have come through. I've had the randomest helicopters. So I've had people do pickup trucks, I've had people do airplanes, I've had a Hello Kitty helicopter, I've had a giraffe helicopter, had a fish helicopter, a lion anyway. So whatever you want to do is just fine. The good news about creativity is this: if you do something that's more personal to you, you're liable to put more time into it, and it's liable to turn out better, and it usually does. So that's why I allow it so much, is it gives you that opportunity. The reason we do this helicopter is not for the helicopter. It's great because we finish it usually right around the holidays, and you can give it to a niece or a nephew or something. I've had a lot of students, as soon as they finish the first one, they make a second one. If they have twins or something as nephews and nieces, and that works too. So it's good for that. But specifically, the reason we do this is so that you learn all the skill sets that go with this. So we're going to learn a whole bunch of different machines. You're going to use the planer to plane down this material to a certain thickness, and then you're going to use the sanders at angles. We're going to use a drill press. You're going to use a drill press at an angle. You're going to learn how to not blow out the opposite side. We're going to use a router. A whole bunch of machines that you haven't used all inside this little package. And that's specifically why we do it, because you get so many opportunities to use so many different machines. So what you're going to do is, we have a whole bunch of wood here, right? And not all wood is the same, so that's why I wanted to show you. So the first thing we have is this nice piece of Doug fir. Has anybody seen something like this before? What do we usually call something like this? Does anybody know, if you go to a lumber yard, what this would be called? You don't have to know, just checking. Okay, this is called a 2x6. Now the actual dimensions aren't 2 inches by 6 inches. And we won't get into that right now. It's a little bit less than those dimensions, but we call this 2x6. And everybody, how many of you heard of a 2x4? Same thing. It's just a little bit smaller. It's 2 inches by 4 inches, but it's not actually those. It's 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches. Anyway, so the problem with Doug fir is that it has a really wide grain in it, and it's not very strong. It's not a hardwood. It's a softwood. So if I run my fingernail across this, you can see I can mark it up just that easy with my fingernail. Well, we don't want your helicopter damaged really easily, so we're using hardwood. So most of the wood over here, in fact, 99% of this is hardwood, and I'll damage my fingernail if I try and mess with it. So that's the good news. The bad news is, just like that piece, there will be some pieces of softwood in here because the student didn't know and they put it over here. Most of our softwood is under that chop saw over there, but all the hardwood is here. So what you're going to do is, you're going to decide, first of all, which helicopter design you want. If you want to make your own design, then you can draw it out on a piece of paper and cut it out, and you'll have your template. If you want to copy one of these and then modify it, that's just fine too. Just make sure you check it off with me before you start making the Taj Mahal and it doesn't work out. So first thing you're going to ask is, which one's easier? They're not. They're both hard. That's the deal of the project. You're learning a whole bunch of new machines. They both have little extra things on them that make it a little bit harder. This one's a little harder to drill in the end because it's a little bit smaller, and this one you have a little bit more sanding because it's a little bigger. So it's really up to you and which one interests you more. So first you're going to pick your design. I'm going to say I'm going to do this big helicopter, and so I need to find a piece of material. Does anybody remember, how thick does this piece of material need to be? 3/4. 3/4. So I need to find a piece of material that is 3/4 or bigger, and it needs to fit this whole thing on it. So I'm going to grab a piece of wood, something hopefully that will fall on my head. Oh, that one's even glued together. Isn't that great? Okay, I have a piece of wood, and it actually fits my design almost perfectly. So I can tell right now that it's just about 1 inch tall, so it's probably going to work just fine. I'm going to go over to the planer, plane it down to 3/4, lay this on it, trace it out, and then I'm ready to start cutting it out for my helicopter. Now the problem is, I said all wood isn't made the same. So at first glance, this seems like a perfect choice, right? It's almost the exact right size, and it's a cool color. When you stain this, it'll actually come out with a little bit more reddish hue to it, so it's a really cool piece. But then if I look a little bit closer, what do you see on the end right here?
Crack.
There's a little crack. We don't do crack, okay? What's going to happen is if you cut that out, there's a crack goes right along here, and part of this might shear off later. So what can we do? Is we can find a new piece. That's a good choice. Another option is, what if we flip this upside down and move it over here? Now are we away from the crack? Yeah, we are. So we can still make this work, I just have to change my design a little bit. So this right here is probably the ideal piece. If you're looking for a piece for doing your helicopter, it's really the best one. Because what's going to happen is you're going to come over here and you're going to get something like this. And you're going to go, this is going to be great. Why is this not great? There's 3 reasons. What's the first one? It's a lot bigger. If I was to cut my helicopter out of this piece, I would actually be losing money. When you get done, you can sell your helicopter for probably 15 bucks. You know how much this board right here costs? This board, if I was to go to Home Depot, if it didn't have a hole in it right here, this would probably cost about 10 bucks. So I'm going to cut everything else out, and that's not including my all the rest of my pieces, my screws, my blades, and my, I just drew a blank. Pontoons, thank you. So, the first reason this is a bad idea is I'm going to lose money on this project if I do this. And you're not losing money. Who's losing money? Yeah, I'm losing money. So does that make me want to grade you very well? No, we're not going there. It just makes me feel bad because I'm the one who got all this wood donated, and then you guys basically throw it away. And obviously you're not doing it. I'm just saying what would happen. So the first reason is that we don't want to waste a lot of wood. What's the second bad thing about where it's located on here?
It's against the grain.
It is against the grain. Smarty pants over here. What do you remember about the planer? You need a plane with the grain. You have to plane the same direction as the grain. And if I put this through the planer this direction, what's going to happen? It's going to chip, and it's going to grab that, and it's all going to get chewed up by the time it comes out the other side of the planer. I need to plane it this direction. Is it 12 inches long? It's going to be close. Probably would make it just barely. So that means I'd have to put mine this direction to make it work. So it goes with the grain. That make sense? If it doesn't, when you find your piece, just come find me. And the last thing, the one that's most important, I don't know if somebody mentioned it or not, but this right here, if I cut this out of the center of the board, basically I'm throwing all this other material away. If I just moved it down right here, now we could save all this material for probably 3 other projects. Does that make sense? We want to save money on this project. If I was to use the small one and use this right here, I'd cut this off on the bandsaw, and now I have a small piece to go plane. That make sense? And now I'm saving all this material, so I'm really only using $2 of this material. So now I'm going to make money again. All right. So I know this is a lot of information really fast, but that's why we're going over it. Is I want you, when you come over to get your helicopter material, the best thing to remember is that as soon as you find it, come check with me. And I'm going to say if that's a good board or a bad board. And that'll save you, I can't tell you how many students come up to me after they've cut the whole thing out. And this is usually when it happens. They cut the whole thing out and they're like, isn't this beautiful? And I'm like, it's beautiful that you have to start over. And they're like, what? I'm like, well, do you see all the cracks in this board? It's going to fall apart as soon. So you don't necessarily know what to look for, and I want to save you the time of all that energy putting into it. So pretty much all this material is free to use. However, if you come up to me with a board like, do you still have the one you have? If you come up to me with a board like this, here is a piece of walnut. It's got a pretty good character grain. Well, it's not character, it's a pretty good grain though. You're going to come up to me and you're going to say, can I use this one? And you're taking a $15 board and you're going to cut out a $2 piece. So what am I going to tell you?
Yeah.
Probably not. Now, what can you do?
Cut it in half.
Well, if you cut it in half, you're taking a $15 board and you're cutting it in half, and you're making two pieces that are only worth $4 after that, because it's not a big piece anymore, so it loses value. It's not like you just lose it in half. Now you don't have as much projects as you can do with this. However, if I could fit 8 different pieces on here, 8 times 2 is 16, and so if I got enough people together to say, hey, do you want to use this board with me? You could get a whole bunch of different designs on here all laid out, and then you could all use this one. Does that make sense? So if you find a board that's really big, first I'm going to laugh, and then I'm going to smile, and then I'm going to cry, and then I'll ask you to go find a different one. So try and find the smallest you can, because the smaller the project is, the more money you're going to make by the time you get done with this project. If I went to Home Depot and grabbed this, they'd be probably throwing this away for, okay, because it's so small they can't sell it. But I can make something out of this. This right here will fit my small design just perfect, and it's over 3/4 of an inch, and so I'm going to make money. This is free, and I'm going to make a project afterwards. So that's what I want to do with all this material. I lost you, or are we still good? Most of you are just asleep. That's okay. All right, last thing. If I grab a piece like this, this fits on there. What's the downside? It's going to take forever for me to plane it. I'm going to be here. About Christmas time, we'll get done with this, and you'll be like, sweet! No, that's not cool. So if I went over to the planer and started planing down, besides throwing half of this material up the chute and it going outside and we have to clean it out later, the other problem is I'm only taking a 1/16 off at a cut. So it's going to take me probably a good, 15 minutes to get down to 3/4 of an inch. So what kind of piece do I want to find? Something that's closer to 3/4, a thinner one. So I know this is a lot of information. Basically, the best thing I can tell you is find a piece of wood you think works, come over, and I'll tell you yes or no. And that's going to save you so much time. You come over and I say, hey, there's a crack right here. We can adjust this a little bit. After you find your piece of material, like this one is really nice for this, I need one middle piece, and then how many side pieces? 2. Will this fit on here? No. What do I need to do with this? I need to find a different piece. And the coolest thing, I think the coolest thing, is if you can find something of a different color. Because when you have contrasting colors, it always looks cooler. So if you get 2 dark pieces with this and 1 light piece in the middle, it will actually, it kind of pops, especially when you oil it afterwards, it kind of stands out a little bit. So if I can come over here and find a darker piece that's close to 3/4, and this one is exactly 3/4 already, which is handy. So I can put a piece here and a piece here, and now I've got both those and this. This one's already 3/4, this one I need to plane down to 3/4, so I go over to the planer and set it up for that. Does that make sense, finding your piece? Question?
Do we need to stain them?
We will stain them at the end. The reason we stain them, one is so you learn how to stain. It only takes about 30 seconds. But 2, it's so that if somebody spills coffee on it, it doesn't stain it for you. After you stain it, then the coffee's not going to make a big deal. Any other questions on this project before we get going? All right, cool.